Now, we're going to hear another story of Moses. So I'm going to invite Moses to come forward. Everyone's figured out what this is, yes? You can stand on that side and use this microphone. Okay? I'll start, and then your parts are marked. Now one day, when Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, he guided his flock far away from its usual pastures to the other side of the desert, and came to a place known as Horeb, the mountain of God. There, a special messenger of the Eternal appeared to Moses in a fiery blaze from within a bush. Moses looked again at the bush as it blazed, but to his amazement, the bush did not burn up in flames.
Why is this bush not burning up? I need to move a little closer to get a better look at this amazing sight.
When the Eternal One saw Moses approach the burning bush to observe it more closely, he called out to him from within the bush.
Moses, Moses.
Moses.
Right here.
Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals and stand barefoot on the ground in my presence, for this ground is holy ground. I'm the true God, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
A feeling of dread and awe rushed over Moses. He hid his face because he was afraid he might catch a glimpse of the true God.
I have seen how my people in Egypt are being mistreated. I've heard their groaning when the slave drivers torment and harass them, for I know well their suffering. I've come to rescue them from the oppression of the Egyptians, to lead them from that land where they are slaves, and to give them a good land, a wide open space flowing with milk and honey. The land is currently inhabited by Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The plea of Israel's children has come before me, and I've observed the cruel treatment that they've suffered by Egyptian hands. So go. I'm sending you back to Egypt as my messenger to the Pharaoh. I want you to gather my people, the children of Israel, and bring them out of Egypt.
Who am I to confront the Pharaoh and lead Israel's children out of Egypt?
Do not fear, Moses. I will be with you every step of the way. And this will be the sign to you that I am the one who has sent you. After you have led them out of Egypt, you will return to this mountain and worship God.
Let's say I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your father has sent me to rescue you. And then they reply, what's his name? What should I tell them?
I am who I am. This is what you should tell the people of Israel. I am has sent me to rescue you. This is what you are to tell Israel's people. The eternal God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob is the one who has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my name by which all future generations shall remember me.
Amen. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God, and thanks to Moses. And God, I said that already. And thank you, Phil, and thank you, Jack. This is a there we go, good. This is a story which is very familiar. It's familiar to us as Christians. Any of us who went to Sunday school, at least, learned this story in Sunday school, right? Again, these Moses stories are great Sunday school stories because they're so vivid and they have things that will catch and stick in your mind. We've all read about, heard about, thought about the burning bush. I think if we ever had any experience of this in Sunday school at least. And this is also one of those stories that has many more layers when we as adults learn more about it, think more about it, and understand more about what's going on here. It's a folk story. We have our own folk story as sort of 21st century North Americans. The one that I thought of was the story of Johnny Appleseed. Is that a story that you've heard before, that you're familiar with? Yeah, I thought so. We may remember more or fewer of the details, but we've all I have a picture in my head of this guy with a great big burlap sack walking around the country, just sort of distributing seeds wherever he goes, and I have no idea about the accuracy of that picture, but it's not really what matters. What matters is we share the story of someone who is concerned about preserving the richness of our natural heritage and made the effort to go out and to spread the seeds and to do something about it. So when we hear Johnny Appleseed, we all have that same common memory. Another one I think is probably the story of George Washington and the cherry tree. Everybody know that one? Yeah. Okay. I cannot tell a lie. Pretty sure that is a totally apocryphal story. Did not happen. But it's real in the sense that we all have it in our minds. We all have it in our sort of collective folk memory of what it means to live in this country and some of the things that are important in our heritage. And we are not a particularly storytelling people. I mean, we tell stories and some of them stick, but I know the Native American community has hundreds of wonderful, rich and varied stories. I just don't know any of them. But these kinds of stories tend to be a part of the culture of people who are less urbanized, who are less literate, who are less technologically involved, because we have so much technology around us that we don't have time to sit around and tell each other stories, and we do sometimes our own stories, but that's rare. And I kind of feel bad for our kids. I know they have a whole different life ahead of them, but I don't know that they get that chance to sit around and just listen to the adults tell their stories. I hope everybody's still reading to their kids at that time, but I remember reading fairy stories and reading fables and just picking up all of this sort of cultural knowledge from all of the stories. Nobody was saying, now you need to learn about your culture. People just said, here, you want to read this book? Yeah, and I usually did. So that's how we pick up that kind of knowledge, is from stories that are told repeatedly. And the story of Moses and the burning bush is exactly one of those stories that would have been told. And it's written down over and over again in the Old Testament. It's referred to many times in the Old Testament, but it also would have been just part of gathering around for dinner and thinking about which story we're going to tell this time, or somebody say, oh man, I saw a really red bush out that reminded me of Moses and the burning bush, or that kind of conversation that people would have just as a part of being the people they were. So this story of the burning bush is very deeply and fundamentally a part of the folk culture of the Hebrew people. When we come to this story as Christians, now we have heard the story again in Sunday school, but not over and over and over and over again. And we come to this story and hear it for the first time, instead of understanding it sort of from the bottom up, instead of understanding, having it just already be a part of who we are, we have to look at it from the top down, really, and look at this story and think about, okay, what does it mean? What's it about? And when we do that, we can begin to see many, many connections to our own faith. Where else do we hear stories about a flame that doesn't burn? There isn't one. Anybody? Can you think about a story in the New Testament especially about a flame or flames or tongues of fire that don't burn? The Jewish people immediately would have understood this is a reference to Moses and the burning bush. That this flame, in the same way that for Moses represented the presence or was the presence of God, this flame that we're experiencing is the presence of God. They wouldn't have wondered, what in the world is going on here? They would have gotten it immediately. They would have understood what was going on. So the connections are there and they're very deep. Another story in the New Testament that begins with someone wandering off into the wilderness is very reminiscent of Jesus' story, Jesus' time in the wilderness that we'll look at when we come to Lent. Now, of course, the story is really similar. The individual is in the wilderness alone and meets God. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. The person that Jesus meets in the wilderness is the devil. Yes, that's one of the people that he encounters, but I think in an important way, we can also say that Jesus meets himself there. Because in his responses to the evil one, he confirms for us, because we're watching the story, but for himself, that's what comes out of him. That's who he is, and he's confirmed and he's reassured in that time in the desert that he really is the divine one. He meets the divine one in the wilderness, and it is him. It's a different story for Moses, but it's similar enough that we can look to the two of them and understand that the same theme is flowing through the story. In Jesus, it's sort of all these themes and stories are pulled together and wrapped up, and we have the final version of all of these stories. Although they continue in our own lives, and we know that because the flame continues to appear to the disciples and the Spirit continues to be a part of our lives. But in Jesus, we have the most clearly articulated picture of the divine one, or the eternal one, or God, or the Trinity, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, all there together. And its roots trace all the way back to this fire that doesn't burn. It's very deceptive. When I first turned it on, my hair wasn't pulled back, and I was leaning over it like this, and I kept going like trying to get my hair out of the way. It's a very good illusion, I think. But that's where this story gets back to it. And again, that's a story that's familiar to many cultures. Many cultures have a story of a young man usually that goes out into the wilderness, discover their identity, discover their God, discover something significant about themselves, and come back. So this is a very human story, both in Moses' case and in Jesus' case. And as opposed to Jesus, Moses is very human. So Moses, when God says, hey, I want you to go to the people of Israel, he said, no, you can't be me. I'm not the one that you want. I can't even talk properly. I stutter. Well, that's not in this version of the story, but there's another version of the story where he says, no, I'm not the one that can do that. And God says, I've got you covered. And then his next objection is, who am I to go to the people of Israel? First of all, I was raised in Pharaoh's household, so I'm already the enemy. Secondly, I left the low land of Egypt, and Mary, her name starts with a J. And, I'm working for Jethro, my father-in-law, and I haven't had any contact with them. Who am I to go? They're not going to listen to me. Why would they listen to me? I'm really not the one you want to send, and God says, go. And I think that's a common experience. Most of the time, we're much more likely, in response to what God calls us to do, to say, I can't. And in fact, we're right, often. On our own, we can't. I can't do that. I'm not good enough for that, or I'm not experienced enough for that, whatever our excuse might be. I can't do that. What God promises to Moses is this time, it's not about what you can't do on your own. It's about what you can do in the presence and the power of my Spirit. So this, again, it's an ancient thing. Moses had to learn it, right? Even though he'd grown up in Pharaoh's household, Moses had to learn it. And it's something that we can remember even today. Yes, our first response might be, I can't. And God says, you can, because I am with you. You can't do it on your own, I know that. You're not righteous on your own, I know that. You can't do justice on your own, I know that. But I am with you, and I can do the things that I call you to do. And I bring righteousness where I am. And I bring justice where I am. So when you walk in my way, when you follow the pillar of flame, you can do the things that I've called you to do. And at the very end, when Moses is fussing about, well, they're not going to listen to me, I'm nobody, or I'm an enemy, or why in the world would they listen to me? He asked God, he says, at least give me your name. And God has this wonderful response. I am who I am. Or some versions say, I am who I will be. Or it's apparently in the original Hebrew a wonderful verb that doesn't really have a tense. It's past and it's present and it's future, and it's just I am. I am. I am the divine one. I am the one who can carry you forward. God does go on to say, you can also say that I am the God of your father Abraham, and Isaac, and Joseph. And again, those were all stories that people knew. The stories of Abraham and his wanderings and all the things that he went through before he finally came to the place where he was able to establish the people. Another story of delivery, another story deliverance, another story of God helping the people to thrive. They knew who Abraham was. They knew who Isaac was. They knew who Joseph was. They knew the whole thing. So I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Joseph tells them immediately, again, if they haven't gotten it yet, that I am the God who delivers, and I am the God of abundance, and I am the God who will lead you and guide you. And for us today, that may be the most wonderful gift of, well, there are lots of wonderful gifts. I shouldn't say the most. A wonderful gift of this story. Have you ever been out in the world, walking down the street, maybe at home, maybe in a strange city that you've never been to before, and you've seen someone you recognized, but you couldn't remember their name? Again, a common human experience. Now you can yell out, hey you! And lots of people will probably look at you and shake their heads like, that's rude. But if you know their name, you can yell out, hey Susie! And Susie will click into that, and Susie will hear it, and Susie will turn around and wave at me, and hopefully we can have a conversation, even if we meet each other. It's amazing the places that you meet people, like out in Nevada, all of a sudden you meet somebody from Delaware. But at any rate, when we have that name, we have that connection. Up to this point, God has appeared when and where God has chosen to appear. God appeared to Abraham. Abraham didn't invite God to come and turn his life upside down. God appeared to Noah. Noah didn't invite God to come in and turn his life upside down. And on through the stories we've heard. God appears when God chooses to appear. From now on, because we have a name, we have a connection, and we can call on God. And in Jesus Christ, that name and that connection is put together in the form that fulfills everything that God has begun. So we now, in addition to the promise that we had last week when we talked about the story of the baby in the bulrushes, we learned that God is willing to take and to care for our most precious things. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that's not necessarily the way we look at the story. The way we look at the story is I have to give up my most precious thing. I have to give it away, and that's hard to do. But if you think about it from God's perspective, it's God saying to us, I will take your most precious thing. I will bless your most precious thing, whatever you hold nearest and dearest to your heart. I will take it and take care of it for you, because you know you're limited, and I'm not. And I will take that precious thing and I will care for it like a baby in the bulrushes. Today, we also get the promise that you can call on me. I'll take your precious, precious heart things, and you can call on me whenever you want to. The gift of the story and the gift of Jesus Christ.